My name is Tori, and I am 27 years old. 3 days before everything changed, I believed I understood betrayal, disappointment, and the quiet cruelty that can exist within families. But I had no idea how deep a wound could truly go until I heard the words that would replay in my mind like a curse I could never silence. Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery, my father told the doctor while I lay in a coma. He signed the do not resuscitate order to save money. I didn't hear it in the moment, of course. I was unconscious, suspended somewhere between life and whatever lies beyond it. My body was connected to machines that breathed, measured, and waited. But later, when the nurse with tired eyes and a trembling voice told me what had happened, those words felt as if they had been carved directly into my bones. Before the accident, my relationship with my father had already been fragile, stretched thin by years of emotional distance, his cold calculations, and the unmistakable sense that I was always an expense he regretted rather than a daughter he loved. Still, some naive part of me believed that when faced with losing me, he would choose me. That illusion died long before I ever opened my eyes in that hospital bed. The crash itself was sudden, violent, and brutally ordinary. Rain-slicked road, a truck that lost control, headlights exploding across my windshield like a final warning from fate. Then, darkness. No pain, no fear, just absence. While I drifted in that silence, my father sat in a brightly lit office with a doctor. Not grieving, not praying, but negotiating. Money, always money. The cost of surgery, the probability of recovery, the burden of long-term care. To him, my life had become a financial equation, a liability to be minimized. And so he signed. A signature, just ink on paper, yet heavy enough to decide whether my heart should be allowed to fight if it faltered. He signed the do not resuscitate order to save money. When I finally woke up, the world felt distant and muffled, as though I had returned from somewhere I was never meant to see. My muscles were weak, my thoughts slow, but my memory was intact. The nurse hesitated before telling me the truth, perhaps hoping I was too disoriented to understand, but clarity came like a blade. I asked once, then again, until she whispered the story she clearly wished she didn't have to tell. My father's words, his decision, his absence afterward. Something inside me shifted then, something cold and frighteningly calm. When I woke up, I didn't say anything. There were no tears, no screaming, no dramatic confrontation like you might expect. People imagine revenge as rage, but mine was born from something far more dangerous: silence. In that silence, I began to see my father not as a parent, not even as a villain, but as a man governed entirely by greed, a man who believed money could shield him from consequence, who believed decisions made in private rooms never echo. What he never understood was that choices leave trails, and trails can be followed. As my body slowly healed, my mind grew sharper, fueled by the unbearable knowledge that my own father had measured my worth against a hospital bill and found me too costly. Visitors came and went, offering sympathy and hollow comfort, but he did not. Perhaps guilt kept him away, or perhaps indifference. Either way, his absence told me everything I needed to know. I spent those long hours staring at the ceiling, replaying possibilities, tracing connections, remembering details about his business. I did something far worse that left him bankrupt in 24 hours. But that part of the story, the part where power shifted and the man who priced my life learned the cost of his own decisions, did not begin with shouting or accusations. It began with patience, with understanding the architecture of his world, with recognizing that empires built on arrogance often collapse from within. As the hours turned into days and the machines around me gradually disappeared, I felt something stronger than anger taking hold: determination, a quiet, unwavering resolve. My father had signed a document expecting my story to end in that hospital room, expecting silence to swallow the consequences of his choice. He never imagined that I would wake up, that I would remember, that I would act. And most of all, he never imagined that the daughter he considered too expensive to save would become the very force that unraveled everything he had spent a lifetime building. 72 hours after I woke up, my father still believed he had escaped the weight of his decision. In his world, money erased discomfort, influence neutralized scrutiny, and time buried inconvenient truths. But while he moved through boardrooms and private calls with the same confidence that had defined him for decades, I was already setting into motion something he would never see coming. Hospitals are strange places. People assume they are only for healing bodies. Yet for me, it became a place of awakening far beyond the physical. As my strength returned, so did memories I had once ignored. Hushed conversations about shell companies, tense arguments over hidden liabilities, and the subtle but unmistakable patterns of a man who treated legality as a flexible suggestion rather than a boundary. My father's empire, polished and imposing from the outside, was laced with vulnerabilities only someone close enough could truly understand. And I understood it intimately. I knew which partnerships were held together by trust instead of contracts, which investors were nervous, which deals relied on reputations that could shatter under the right pressure. He had spent years teaching me, unintentionally, how his world worked, not out of love, but because he never imagined I would one day use that knowledge against him. The first move was not dramatic or loud. Revenge rarely is. It was a quiet message, carefully worded, sent to a single individual who had long suspected my father's manipulations but lacked confirmation. I didn't fabricate anything. Lies are unstable weapons. I simply connected dots, revealed timelines, and exposed inconsistencies that had always existed beneath the surface. Doubt is a powerful solvent. Once introduced, it spreads on its own. From there, the unraveling accelerated with almost terrifying speed. Phone calls multiplied, meetings were abruptly scheduled, audits, once routine, turned hostile. My father, accustomed to control, suddenly found himself reacting instead of commanding. 72 hours, that was all it took for suspicion to metastasize into panic. Investors began freezing funds, partners demanded clarifications he could not convincingly provide, and long-suppressed tensions erupted into open confrontation. The same arrogance that had fueled his rise now amplified his fall. He dismissed concerns too aggressively, threatened where reassurance was needed, and underestimated the fragility of loyalty built on fear rather than respect. I watched it all unfold from a distance, each update arriving like an echo of inevitability. There was no satisfaction in a theatrical sense, no triumphant celebration. What I felt was colder, heavier, a grim recognition of consequence. The man who once reduced my life to a cost-benefit analysis was now facing calculations of his own. Only this time, the numbers refused to obey him. Within those 72 hours, regulatory inquiries emerged like storm clouds. Old rivals seized opportunities with predatory precision, and the carefully constructed illusion of invincibility collapsed. Credit lines evaporated, assets were contested, confidence, the invisible. And then came the moment that would have been unimaginable to him just days earlier. Financial paralysis. Accounts locked, deals terminated, legal teams scrambling, not for expansion, but for survival. He lost everything. The speed of it stunned even those who had long resented him. Empires do not usually crumble overnight, yet his did, because they had never been as solid as they appeared. They were towers of leverage, perception, and intimidation, powerful, but catastrophically brittle. When the final confirmation reached me, When I heard the words bankruptcy and protection spoken in a tone of disbelief rather than strategy, I closed my eyes and remembered that hospital room, that signature, that decision made while I lay helpless. The symmetry was impossible to ignore. He had believed my life was an expense he could choose not to bear. Now he was learning that choices carry prices beyond money. People often imagine revenge as explosive, but mine was quiet, almost clinical. I did not shout. I did not confront him with dramatic speeches. In fact, when he finally stood at the foot of my hospital bed, eyes hollow, posture diminished, there was a strange, unbearable silence between us. For the first time in my life, he looked uncertain, as if struggling to reconcile the daughter he had dismissed with the reality before him. I searched his face for remorse, for understanding, for any sign that he grasped the magnitude of what had truly destroyed him. But all I saw was shock, not at his own actions, but at their consequences. That was the tragedy of it. Not his downfall, but his blindness. I had not ruined an innocent man. I had merely removed the scaffolding that had long concealed the instability of his world. And as he stood there, stripped of power, wealth, and certainty, I understood something that neither victory nor anger could erase. Some losses are irreversible, regardless of who suffers them. Money can rebuild businesses. It cannot restore trust, love, or the years of damage inflicted by cold indifference. My father lost everything in 72 hours, but the true collapse had begun long before, the moment he chose savings over his own daughter's life. If there is anything my story proves, it is this: the most devastating consequences are often born not from dramatic acts, but from quiet decisions made when we believe no one is listening, no one will remember, no one will survive to respond. I did, and everything that followed was simply the echo of a signature he never